we'll start. I think but in any case, let me call up the PNGDF commander and his team to please take your seats. Secretary Akipe and yeah, just the two of you. Admiral, Rear Admiral Polewara and Mr. Akipe, please take your seats. For everyone who might be tuning in for the first time, these are properly constituted parliamentary committee hearings, and the proceedings will be recorded. The main goal of the hearings are to, first of all, look into the recommendations that were made on the 2022 general elections and the recommendations that came out of that, and to also speak to the agencies concerned about their preparedness for the 2027 general elections. And once we get the commissioner, the electoral commissioner, we'll also find out about their conduct of the current LLG elections that are underway. Without further ado, let me welcome Rear Admiral Polewara, the Chief of our Defense Forces, and the Secretary, Mr. John Akipe. Gentlemen, I assume both of you have received a copy of the recommendations from the committee, the special committee. Have you both got copies? Have you been given copies? Secretary, perhaps with you.
Yes, we have, Chairman.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. For the record, both of them have received the recommendations. With the recommendations pertaining to the Papua New Guinean Defense Forces, could you give us an account of how much you have perhaps progressed these recommendations? Well, let's put that question aside for now, and let me go to some of the questions that we have for you. For example, in the relevant recommendations for the PNGDF, one of the questions that we have is that for 2027, what are the coordination efforts that have already been undertaken between yourselves, the PNG Electoral Commission, and the RPNGC? Have there been any consultation meetings to date? And if so, could you brief us on that?
Chair, members of the committee, I can say that we, for defense, we are working towards 2027 plus other issues that we are facing in the country. But obviously, we haven't discussed for 2027 with the Electoral Commission or RPNGC. But other operations with the RPNGC, yes, we are regularly meeting, especially security issues up in the islands.
Okay, thank you. That's something that we might have to rectify going forward, but I'm happy with that response.
If I can add.
Continue.
We foresee like the challenges that 2027 brings us. Plus, we are moving us here as a country, moving towards 2027, and 2027 moving to us. 2027 moving to us, we have no control. But we moving towards 2027, national general elections, we have some control. And there's some things that we have to do now before 2027. We cannot wait for 2027 before we start, taking action for the 2027 NGE.
Thank you. That's part of the reasons why we are holding this inquiry now, is to determine the preparedness, because the committee also believes that we have to start planning and start taking some of those actions now and not wait for next year, because time will run out. As we have found out from the 2022 elections, preparation started way too late. And that's one of the reasons why it affected some of the outcomes there. One of the concerns that come out, and a lot of the complaints we get from the public, is to do with the conduct, the ethical conduct of PNGDF personnel, not just PNGDF, police as well, but in this particular instance, I'm asking the PNGDF, in terms of the ethical conduct of your members. Have you, first of all, noted those concerns? And second of all, are there any actions you are taking in your organization to ensure that these issues around the ethical conduct of members of the security forces, especially those that come under your command, are being dealt with prior to 2027? Or is there any work, is there any intention to deal with that?
Yes, Chairman, members of the committee, what happened in 2022, we take note of that. On the scene, people were removed from elections back to Port Moresby, and we identified, people that will not be deployed on certain areas.
Was there any disciplinary action taken against those officers that were involved in such practices that you identified?
Yes, yes, sir.
And part of that disciplinary process involves you making sure that they will not be deployed in the future.
That is correct, and some, like it has to go to our, normal, the police system. If the commissioner was here, you could, shed some light into that, because we are called out to support the police and support the electoral commission.
The commissioner will be coming, and we will put those questions to him.
Yes, sir.
So, in your case, in your organization, you are taking some action. Is that correct?
That is correct. Yes. For what happened in 2022, members were removed from on reports, on allegations. We remove them. We don't allow that to to progress. If there's allegations against a member, we remove them on the spot. And I have my chief of joint operations with me here.
Thank you.
Chief, welcome again to this hearing of the committee, and thank you for making time for this very important discussion. I just wanted to get some clarification from yourself. I think the question was asked, but I don't think I heard the response well. But what role has the PNG Defence Force planned for the 2027 elections? I think that should be the question. And what coordination is underway with the Electoral Commission and RPNGC in this regard?
We foresee and we plan, internally for what might happen. That's our assumption of what might happen. The worst case.
Yes.
Example, if I can give an example, like personal protective equipment, preparing all this. We had issues with like vehicle to be available, mobility, logistics, in the last election. So these are the things that we are looking at, and this must happen this year, next year, like getting a request in the budget. All these things must happen this year and next year. By 2027, sir, we will not make it. That's the experience in the last election. We requested for vehicle. It did not arrive until 6 months after the election. Our country is it's a very, very challenging geography. especially it's mountainous, it's very archipelagic, and in the past we have 7 ships
Yes.
and our own medium lift capability and helicopters. And these are the challenges that we will face in 2027. There's not many helicopter companies in the country, and it will be a competition of rotor wing support when it comes to 2027. And if we have to have this, it has to happen now, sir. Also, in our maritime space, we have 4 ships, that's a patrol boats, and 1 landing craft, which is operational. From what we had in the past, 5 patrol boats and 2 landing crafts. From 7, we reduced to now 5. For the defense force only, I'm not talking about the industry and other agencies, but most of the time, it's been defense when requested to support police, electoral commission. Most of the time, we provide the logistics and we support the 2 agencies. That's the fear we have, in case we might fail. All the security challenges that we face in 2017 into 2018, double or couple with the landslide in Southern Highlands,
Yes.
it was a double trouble.
Correct.
And in those years, we deployed 300. But 2022 alone, it was a 2,000 defense force personnel only throughout the country.
So thank you for that reply. Do you anticipate that number of required defense personnel increasing for 2027 or being maintained?
So that will depend on assessment, but for our country, we have to prepare for the worst. We have fixed our recruiting system. There's a 180 going through the recruiting, and after that, the numbers as per the government directions supposed to be years back. I think 2017, we are supposed to be 10,000, which did not happen, so we are working towards that.
Now these, what are the current numbers of the defense personnel?
Not down to the exact figure, but so I can tell you that we are over 4,000. But
So-
people are getting old. People have to, we have to retire them from the force and bring in new ones.
Correct. So in terms of the potentially retiring personnel and recruitment, does that commensurate and does it stabilize the 4,000, or are you anticipating that number increasing to be available for deployment in 2027?
So we have control over people leaving the force, but we're looking at the directions from the policy directions from the government is 400, but we are looking at 500 every 6 months. We are going back to the 6 months recruiting region.
Now, you made reference to resourcing and preparations for 2027. It very much hinges on the availability of resourcing, and in a country like ours, and the systems and the bureaucratic red tapes that are involved in procuring goods and services and also funding. How are you finding, are these resources readily available to the Defense Force at this time? Are they, in terms of the election preparations, have funding been made available?
Not at this stage, but I will ask the Secretary to comment on funding. Defense is the policy and budget is with the Secretary. Strategy and operations is with me, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, members of the committee. So usually the Defense Force and the defense preparations are usually conducted from the assessment, based on the assessment by the Defense Intelligence, and also some information from sharing from the police intelligence. And so luckily we have the existence arrangements between our bilateral partner, especially the Australian Defence through the Defence Cooperation Program. Such major military planning activity for elections are conducted, and then we as to how they could come in to assist. And over the last election and the last 2 elections, bigger activity like military lift, transport has been provided by the defense. So usually the allowance and smaller activities, logistic activities within the country are funded by ourselves, but the bigger lift usually by the Australian Defence Assistance. At this point in time, may I also inform the committee that we have not received anything or no instruction from the Electoral Commission or from the Police of Distant Defense Assistance in the coming 2027 elections.
Before Sepuka asks questions, is the RPNGC ready to come up and take their seats next to the defense forces, or should we wait for the commissioner? Sorry, we just take a little break to. Are you ready to take your seats, or would you like to wait for the commissioner?
We can wait for the commissioner, if that's okay with the...
That's fine. Thank you. You may take your seats. Sepuka, please go.
Thank you, Chairman. Morning, Chief and Secretary. Secretary, continuing from what the member for Hirikoiri was asking, did you actually submit in terms of the recommendations, and I'm glad that you've got a copy of the recommendations and the report, and I hope that you have specifically looked at the recommendations that were tailored for the Defense Force preparedness. And in view of one of the very clear outcomes in the last inquiry, that was that there was lack of time in preparing for the 2022 elections, and that one of the strongest recommendations was that we must at least take more than 2 years to start preparing. And therefore, the question therefore is, Secretary, did you actually submit for budget for 2025, election-related budget, that the Defense Force can be able to process some of the recommendations in the report? The question is, did you submit a budget for 2025 for Defense Force election preparedness or no? I just want a simple answer.
Thank you, Chairman. The defense election budget for 2026 will be for this year, for 2026. Usually our budget, our election planning commences in 2026 leading to 2027. So we are preparing budget for 2026, now for 2026.
Yeah, we are saying that that's not enough. That's a strong recommendations right throughout the inquiry. That's not enough, and we're already halfway in 2025. And you're talking about 2026, election is in 2027 May. And so I want you to know that the strongest recommendation was there must be sufficient time for planning and resource availability. And therefore the importance of coordination with all the agencies of state that is going to be responsible, and for you is security issues. The second issue is the issue that was highlighted, Chief, by your predecessor when we asked him to come. And he gave us a map of the intelligence map that Defense Force created and showed us all the red zones. And the Defense Force intelligence map was better than the police one. And therefore, one of the recommendations is coordination and intelligence. That has to be done, because the question that was asked was, knowing that you have a map which showed the red zones where the guns were circulating, why didn't you take action? Why did you just leave that in intelligence and not take any action? And therefore, in the recommendations, we recommended that there should be a strategy to start moving to identify and remove illegal guns in the community, particularly in those red zones. And in this case, it's the Highlands region, specifically, and your intelligence map showed that. And so Your predecessors and the current police commissioner told us that if we don't take any action preparing well for the 2027 elections, the 2027 elections in terms of security will be worse than the 2022 one. We have to get this in our heads, everybody's heads. The responsible agencies that you are in charge of, defense and police, and treasury and finance, electoral commission. This is where I don't know whether you have read the recommendations. Why are you not taking action for budget support? And so my question is, you need to start working now. You have to, in the next time we call you up, you have to tell the committee that this is the action that you are going to take with regards to the issues of security, intelligence sharing, and also actions for awareness, and also use your red maps there to go and develop a strategy to Rausimol display illegal guns. Why are we waiting until the election comes and you are just showing us the maps and this is the red maps, but the question is the guns are still around while your intelligence shows that they are in these parts of the country. So tell us, Chief and Secretary, have you felt this, the agency? Because you reported to us that if we don't address the issues, particularly security-related issues, next election will be worse. This is why we are worried. So you have to assure us and the country that you are actually preparing now. Why did you miss the budget request for 2025? Thank you.
Press the button in front of you before you speak. Thank you.
Sir, I will not blame those before me. I'm in the office. So we have taken some action. I personally gave the directions that every weapon that is surrendered, will be cut.
Sorry, of the police. But coming back to that, okay. I understand what you're trying to say. The intelligence gathering aspects of what you do. To what extent are you sharing that information with the RPNGC? Could you perhaps, you don't have to get into the details, just give us the broad outline of the extent to which you are sharing information, intelligence information with the police.
So I can say that on the ground, yes, there's a regular daily, exchange of, information between the two forces, because we work under the police, not work under, but support the police. But at this level, yeah, between me and the commissioner, yes. About operations, I can say that I can tell the committee we talk about the operations, but the nitty-gritties of it we haven't discussed since my time in the office.
Okay, coming back to that, you see, one of the critical things that we identified, and in fact, it was the defense personnel, the police, and NIO that gave us this information. And they said to us that there was a complete failure of intelligence, and that's in the report. So the intelligence gathering, intelligence sharing aspects of leading into the elections to us forms a critical part of some of our recommendations back to all of you, based on your own input to the committee. So I would have assumed that up till now, there would have been some formal mechanisms developed between police and RPNGC to strengthen your intelligence gathering apparatus. Given that, based on 2022 and based on the testimonies that we've received from your own people, there was a failure in intelligence leading up to 2022, or at least the effective use of intelligence to prevent a lot of these failed elections and violence that we saw in 2022. So, bringing you back to that, has there been any active interventions to try to upgrade the intelligence sharing, how shall I say it, the intelligence sharing activities between yourselves and the police? And if so, could you give us a briefing on that? If not, why not?
Chief, before you answer that, I'll just make it a bit more specific and highlight the recommendations of the committee, which I got before me now, so it will help you to respond. On the coordination and intelligence, it is recommendation 50, 55, and 62, that you engage in joint operational planning and intelligence sharing. Has that been started? 2, implement joint security communication strategy, recommendation 57, and develop a security coding system for risk assessment, recommendation 54. You see, these are very specific recommendations. We didn't beat around the bush as a committee. We wanted action-oriented things that we know you are capable of doing. And you need time to do it, and the committee is worried that we are running out of time.
And those recommendations came from your own people, by the way. Please, you may respond.
So this is the intelligence brief looking forward to 2027. We have already started for defense, but for sharing with police and other agencies on officer level, like me knowing what is happening, not at that level yet. But for defense, we are preparing and we foresee, we are planning for the worst case. And I mentioned the provincial authorities. That is the softer approach to dealing with our people. There is also the harder approach, which we are not supposed to use against our own people. In uniform, I am not supposed to hurt my people. But there are times that we have to cross the red line. So to deal with our people that's what I meant by, through the LLG president, through the councillors, and then we will deal with it. They know exactly where it is. Some of these things up in the highlands are hired guns. They are not stationary at one spot as per the red map. If there's a situation in Enga, people hired from other provinces with guns to come and do what they have to do. For example, the massacre that we all witnessed and the world witnessed. So these are some of the things that we are working defense and under the current SOE, which has expired, to deal with the gun issue and also a preparation for the 2027. But so yes, we have taken some steps internally in defense, but formally with the other 2 agencies, not yet.
Chief, I just have another quick question. You've made reference to an intelligence brief at the table. Is that a document you are going to submit to the committee for its consumption or understanding or appreciation of the scope or the extent of preparedness or working towards the, getting ready for 2027?
So if you allow me, I can prepare a formal one, detailed one for the committee.
Thank you. The next question is, I suppose we are discussing much of these exchanges centered around intelligence and information sharing and coordination. But we're looking towards 2027. My question would be what, and because of that, has there been any joint training conducted or training on operational planning and exercises conducted between the police and the RPNGC and Electoral Commission?
And yourselves?
And yourselves. The Electoral Commission, the police force and the defense force, obviously the main stakeholders of conducting any election. Has there been any training and operational planning exercises done thus far?
Negative, sir.
I want to follow up on an earlier intervention that I think, Secretary, you made. So this question goes to you. You mentioned that you were going to submit for budget next year. Okay. For the 2027 elections. I assume you made some budget submissions last year for this year, did you not? Did you make some submissions to Planning and Treasury for funding? For whatever, say, not for elections, but for other things?
Yes, Chairman, we did.
Okay, it is now May. Have you received that funding that you requested?
It comes.
No, have you received funding? This is May. I'm asking in May. Have you received that funding?
I'll say negative.
Okay. When do you expect to receive that funding?
Chairman, I can't say.
You can't say.
I can't tell Treasury.
All right. So
not.
you submitted, and I'm going to come to my questions. Leave your microphone on, please. I'm going to come to my question. So you've submitted as a department for funding for your normal work last year. It got approved in the budget that we passed. It is now May, and you haven't received that money. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. So let's just say you received that money in, say, November or December. Let's say, for argument's sake. If you receive it in November or December, are you able to spend that money before accounts close to fund whatever it is? Yes or no?
It'd be difficult to do that, Chairman.
Okay, difficult. So the answer is no.
No.
Thank you. All right, let's go to 2026 now. You just explained 2025, what actually happens in 2025. And I assume this is what happened last year too. And this is coming back to the concerns of the committee. And again, let me say, these issues were raised by the Defense Force, they were raised by the Police Force, and they were raised by the Electoral Commission. All of you raised these issues to ask the committee. We heard you, and we put all of them into these recommendations. Okay. Now, I put it to you. If you put in a budget for the 2027 elections this year, and Parliament approves it, because Parliament has to approve it, current practice is that by May, you still won't receive that money. You are most likely going to receive that money in December of next year, December 2026. Now, does that give you enough time as an organization to pay for all of the things you need for the 2027 elections? Yes or no?
Chairman, practically that's impossible. But we hope common sense prevail in the Treasury and Finance for them to make sure disbursement occurs.
Your vehicles arrived after the election.
No.
So essentially, we might have missed the boat, given the practical realities of how funding actually arrives at government institutions, including your own. So it's now May, you have, look, I'm asking you because ECP provincial government hasn't received any money, so I know how this actually works. And I'm sure that when we call the police up here, they're going to say the same thing. We haven't even received last year's money yet. So I'm already worried now as chairman that we are going to miss our targets for 2027. Now, I understand that there's a supplementary budget coming. Have you been consulted and have you put your views in? Would you be willing to put your views in if there is a supplementary budget? Yes or no?
Chairman, if we would be very, very interested to also express to the Finance and Treasury our intention for budget and planning going forward if we ask. We have also informed them the situation we face in the military when it comes to disbursement of funds on an ad hoc basis to the authorities concerned as well.
While I have you, last year there was some concerns by your rank and file around some of the allowance issues. And again, I'm trying to labor the point on funding. Can you tell us if that funding was received on time? If not, when was it received? And did you manage to, and when was it you managed to sort out those issues surrounding allowances for your men on operations?
So, Chairman, usually when the NEC does the call-out, it comes with the call-out as well as the directive orders for the call-out as well as the budget funding to go with the call-out. Usually the Defense Force implement the call-out as soon as the orders are signed, but the funds usually never follow the call-out when the call-out takes place. So we manage from a recurrent as best as possible to maintain the troops on the ground. And then that's when the allowance builds up. Towards the end, we are forced to use available funds, including public investment program funds, to sort out allowance for the troops. In the 2024, last year, we have brought closer to that using all the available funds that was meant for other activities. We pull them together to sort the allowance for troops, for the seagoing, for the trainings, for overseas trainings, everybody else across the board spectrum of the PNG Defense Force members and activities.
So essentially, you were running on fumes last year. Is that what you're saying?
You could say that when it comes to allowance and troops.
Okay.
Secretary, if you don't mind me just jumping here on this question of financing. What, if I may ask, are the main areas of expenditure in terms of election support for the Defense Force?
There are three main areas when troops are deployed with respect to expenditure. First is the accommodation of the allowance. Second, on hired vehicles, and third on supplies.
And what are these sort of figures, if you don't mind me asking also?
Usually the heavy lift are assisted by the Australian Defence Force through our defence cooperation arrangement and activities, and also the Australian Defence Force donated some of the supplies for the troops, and so the cost to that effect would be around 60 mil for the whole 2,000 troops across Papua New Guinea. And assuming it's about 60 million kina to finance or to support the PNG Defence Forces intervention or support for election purposes, would the ideal situation be to have those funding paid up front? In the last election, we received a total of about 104 million. 40 million was appropriated early, and that was used to tie down the service providers across Papua New Guinea. And then additional funds were sought after because usually our election preparation are done 6 months before the actual elections and continues on 6 months after the post-elections. So that's why our budget was stretched a little bit to over 150 plus million.
In the recommendations of the committee, recommendation number 66 discusses delivery of election-specific intelligence training. Recommendation number 64 proposes to assistance with the removal of non-licensed firearms. I gather from the exchange from the Chief of Defense that the removal of non-licensed firearm is one employed through consultation of the provincial administration and the community. Is that correct?
Yes, and that's also one agenda that is always discussed in the National Security Advisory Committee.
Is that the only means of disarmament prescribed?
No, but Chairman and members, it depends on police as well and ourselves. When the troops are deployed, police also transfer police powers to the soldiers. But in areas of operations, PNG Defence Force members are restricted to go out full force without the presence of police.
Now, in these operations and gathering of these unlicensed firearms, what kind of firearms have you identified, ones that have been surrendered or been taken up in the hands of civilians?
Remember, I'll leave it to the Chief of Defence Force to answer.
Thank you.
So from factory made to homemade.
And where do you identify these sources to be from?
Those were when I was my presence in Hela province, and those that were surrendered,
Correct.
and some were kept at our forward operating base, which I physically had a look at it and touched, these weapons. But I directed them to, cut them up and destroy them.
Now, these weapons, is there a specific type? When you say factory made, what do you mean by factory made?
Shotguns, but M16s and other Eastern Bloc weapons. I saw photos of them, but I did not.
Sorry, say that again.
Eastern Bloc weapon. These are weapons, something similar to AK-47s and all these, not the Western Bloc weapons. These are Eastern Bloc weapons. When the Eastern Bloc collapsed, these are the weapons, not out, moving around, into countries like Papua New Guinea.
And where are these kind of weapons normally sourced from?
Confidently, I can tell you that it comes from the Western border.
Indonesia.
That's the Western border. And so if I could add, please, from what the Secretary said, the surrendering of weapons, it's not only police and defense. We, like as I mentioned, through the councillors, through the LRG presidents, through church groups, UN and other international organizations are taking a active role, especially in Hela and Enga, to see surrender of these weapons.
No.
Can I intervene? Given the delay in the appearance of the police commissioner, I want to call Mr. Kyle Saltmarsh and Mr. Julius Tassian from the RPNGC to please come take your seats so that some of these questions may be jointly responded to. And can you get the name tags also done? Thank you. You may continue.
Yes. Thank you, Chief. Now, in this regard, therefore, what joint operations have we been planning or have been planned for 2027? Illegal firearms, disarmament. In preparation for a safe, fair, and free election, you need the absence of firearms. Now, what steps, if any, has been conducted between the Defence Force and the police and the Electoral Commission at this point in time?
So regretfully none, but depends, we are doing our part at the border.
Do you think, as a responsible agency of enforcement, implementation of the law and order and security, internal security of the country and election purposes, that this would be the ideal time to start preparing?
That is correct, sir.
Thank you, Commander. You may remain seated and we'll come back to you. I'll just go to the RPNGC. The first one is, I think, Mr. Saltmarsh. Could you just press the green button and for our record state your full name and your designation within the RPNGC?
Thank you, sir. Chief Superintendent Kyle Saltmarsh. I'm Chief of Staff to the Commissioner.
Thank you. Mr. Tassian, could you do the same, please?
I'm Assistant Commissioner Tassian. I'm the Assistant Commissioner Operations.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay. You can continue.
Thank you.
Okay.
I'll pause at that point for the time being.
So while we've got both of you, the senior officers within the RPNGC, you've obviously had the exchange. My first question, and that probably should go to you, Mr. Tassian. In terms of these recommendations, have you read these recommendations from the Special Committee on Elections? Yes or no?
So I've got copies of the recommendations that specifically target the RPNGC. So I've got copies of it, yes.
Excellent. Okay. Now, coming to those questions that are specific to the, and again, these are similar questions to what we've asked the PNGDF. Have you developed any strategies or plans for the 2027 elections? And in terms of resourcing, have you started perhaps procuring those resources that you might need for 2027?
So we have initially started our planning, but it's still in its infancy. We've already started procuring vehicles. We've started off with resources, started off with vehicles. So we have already purchased close to about 120 so far, which have been distributed to all the provinces.
And those vehicles will be used in the elections in 2027?
Yes, sir. Those vehicles will be used during the elections.
Okay. In terms of some of the questions that we've asked the PNGDF, and I come back to this issue of guns, because that's a key recommendation that is in our report. And again, this recommendation, let me make it clear, came from your own, I think, PNGDF and RPNGC. Recommendation 64 says that we recommend that the JSTF, which is I think both PNGDF and RPNGC, must plan for and remove all non-licensed firearms from the general public before the next general elections. Now, this is in response to the contribution from the former PNGDF commander and their assessment, which showed that non-licensed weapons, firearms within the ownership of members of the public, particularly up in the highlands, are a serious threat to the conduct of elections up there. And so the recommendation was for joint operations between the two of you, the two organizations, to remove those weapons. Now, we've heard from the PNGDF commander, Chief of Defense, that they've done 2 such clearances for weapons. Now, from the RPNGC, are you doing similar work?
Yes, sir, we are doing this, practically as the commander has said. We're working side by side with the PNGDF, also with the local administration and the local leaders to try and have those weapons retrieved.
Could you tell us, how difficult is it to, first of all, identify where these weapons are, and second of all, to actually go in and get those weapons? How difficult is it?
So it is very difficult in a sense that we must understand that the norm has changed. Now that some leaders of the highlands, it is no longer it is when you become a leader when you have weapons, things that you can force yourself to become a leader. Trying to get ourselves into those areas, it's pretty difficult.
So
most times we face resistance.
So you are saying that the leaders themselves are arming their people up there?
Right down to village level. So kind of a strong blow house manner.
Another question, are you saying that the leaders use weapons to determine their leadership status?
To a certain extent, sir.
And you're saying that's the norm?
It's a norm in most provinces, sir.
When you say leaders, what?
I'm not saying leaders. I'm saying leaders in a sense that online place, village leaders, strong blow house manner, strong blow place. They use those weapons to defend themselves, defend their villages.
And so does the police and the PNGDF turn a blind eye to those things, or what's the practice? What's the?
No, sir. We've tried. We've tried going in, trying to retrieve those weapons. Most times we face resistance by the locals. Like the Commander PNGDF has said, sometimes we face, repercussions. Villagers are shooting back at us.
So, in terms of this recommendation, are you saying to our people that it's not going to be possible to remove the guns by the time 2027 comes around, or what are you saying?
It may not be possible to retrieve all.
Inspector Saltmarsh? I think.
Chair, thank you.
Sorry, did I get your, is it Inspector or
Chief Superintendent.
Chief Superintendent, my
Thank you.
apologies.
Chair, thank you.
Yeah.
Chair, the normalisation of firearms in sections of the country is a significant challenge for the police and for our communities. We know this. Firearms are a tool that are employed and only useful for illicit means where ammunition is available. It's a
Yes.
two-part equation. The funding of ammunition is a significant concern for the constabulary.
Where is the ammunition coming from?
From cities, sir,
Cities?
from Port Moresby,
Okay.
from societal elites who funnel and fund illicit weapons and illicit ammunition. That's a concern, and currently that is where our investigators are focusing.
What is the source of that ammunition? The source.
Sorry, sir, could you clarify the source?
Okay. You said that the ammunition comes from cities, from the elites. Okay. How do they obtain the ammunition?
That's a very good question, sir, and it's not straightforward. Ammunition, like firearms, comes across international borders. We know historically that there has been ammunition leakage from government stores, and over the last 4 years there's been significant tightening of those government stores. I'm pleased to say that our PNGC ammunition stores are acquitted. They are as tight as they have ever been. I can't say there's no leakage, but I can say it is a significant improvement on the last 4 years. We see ammunition purchased and sold in small-scale amounts from licensed firearms dealers, which is why the Commissioner has over the past 12 months tightened up significantly the policy around the licensing of firearms. It's very rare these days to see a firearm procured, whereas in years gone by, perhaps 15 years ago, there was more of a gun culture where people could acquire firearms legally. That's not the case now. The illicit funding of weapons and tribal violence, which is leading to scores of deaths over the last years, is something that the constabulary takes very seriously. And cutting off this crime type at the knees by stopping the funding is our current focus. At the same time, that's supported by our provincial efforts and efforts of SSD under Assistant Commissioner Tassian to remove weapons. But as the Assistant Commissioner has said, it's a very challenging operating environment.
Chief Superintendent Saltmarsh, if I may just jump in here and ask a quick question. Based on your intelligence, what are the numbers of unlicensed firearm in the hands of civilians?
I don't have that figure at my fingertips, I'm sorry, but I can take that on notice. I can say that the number of unlicensed firearms would be difficult to quantify, in that many of the firearms we see in the Highlands region are homemade, factory-made,
Well, if
as
I may,
opposed to factory-made.
it seems on the general perception is that you have a bit more factory-made than anything that looks like a homemade gun these days.
I don't think, sir, I would, with respect, concur with that. I think that factory-made weapons get headlines. They are there. We're all aware that they come across the border. But I would think it would be my submission that homemades are as equally as dangerous and they're as equally as prevalent.
So if I may add on, CDF rightfully mentioned hired guns. Most of these high-powered weapons or factory-made weapons are moving from province to province as hired guns.
Well, that was the concern we had when we were dealing with the earlier on in terms of our inquiries, was that we were concerned that these weapons could be migrating from one location to another, and we kind of saw that if they are going to migrate from province to province, I mean, what's to stop them, for instance, being used in Morobe? You migrate all the way down there, or coming all the way to Port Moresby, or other areas where these weapons are less prevalent. And so, based on all of that, and again, this is when this report was written, we were concerned and would have wanted a strategy on how to get in there and remove those weapons. Not just because they pose a risk to our citizens every day, but because there was evidence that they could be used to determine the outcome of elections. There were several provinces when we did our inquiries up in the Highlands where the members of the RPNGC and the members of the provincial government requested that they not be interviewed by the committee. They requested that they could speak to us in confidence. So that was the reason why we came up with this recommendation, to deal with that issue, because it was guns that were in the hands of some of these communities that were being used to determine the outcome of the elections. But as you so rightly, as you know in your business, those guns don't just wait for the elections. In between, they are being used to, I guess, determine all kinds of agendas, not just election outcomes. And so it comes back to that question. And let me put it another way. What would it take for us to remove these weapons from these communities? What would it take? And is it something that you would make as a further recommendation rather than just having a blanket, just a broad recommendation that says go out and remove these firearms? What would you recommend? Because the elections are not so far off now. What would it take to remove all these weapons? What sort of support would both of your forces need? Chief Inspector?
Chair, I believe the use of firearms is best tackled by two mechanisms. The first is by cutting off the source of funding that enables the purchase of ammunition, the transfer of illicit firearms. More effective collaboration and more effective targeting of the finance.
Can I stop you there?
Please.
I just wanted clarification. Stopping the funding, what do you mean by that? It's pretty broad in itself. How do we stop the funding?
With respect to the electoral cycle, sir, more effective and transparency mechanisms around the use of funds that are associated with political campaigns. During the electoral cycle, we have intelligence, strong intelligence that indicates funds travel from regional centres to rural centres for illicit purposes. We don't see that just in the electoral cycle, but it's certainly pronounced. The second aspect, which it would be my view is essential in delivering upon the committee's very valid and very strong recommendation, is more effective community leadership in compelling positive behavioural change, in garnering strong community support that firearms are not an acceptable solution, they're not acceptable use, they're not acceptable to possess. What we see is a lack of grassroots community leadership in compelling positive behavioural change.
That's a pretty difficult recommendation, if you ask me. I mean, we accept that societies need to change and values need to change in order for these firearms to be less acceptable. But in the meantime, obviously we have an election coming up. The recommendations from your security forces, which we have taken on board, tell us that we are essentially waiting for a disaster in 2027 if we do not deal with some of these issues, firearms being, I think almost at the top of the list and firearms and ammunition, as you correctly put it. So again, we are looking for, behavior change is a long-term thing. That's going to take 10, 15 years. We have an election that's coming in 1.5 years' time that you have to be properly resourced and, of course, skilled to execute it safely and perhaps with less problems than we've experienced in 2022. Because I think that's what the community would like to see. Our people would like to see a free, fair, and safe elections. I mean, that's, when we went around the country, that was the great desire of all Papua New Guineans, regardless of where they came from. They wanted to see free, fair, and safe elections. And it's a responsibility that we are expecting police, defense force, and all of you to deliver for us. So how do we do that? For you to say the behavior change, we accept that, but we need solutions in the next 18 months.
Chair, I concur. In addition to those long-term shifts that I think we acknowledge need to occur and will take time, we need more effectiveness from our security forces. As we approach this very important electoral process, ensuring that communities are safe to exercise that democratic process is incumbent upon us as security forces. We need to step up and improve our information exchange. Not to say it's not occurring, it is. There is always room for improvement, and being more effective in sharing information and receiving information from the community to know where these weapons are so that they can be removed. That's the first step. Having better engagement, which is where our focus is currently at this stage of planning, better engagement with communities to know where these weapons are so they can be removed.
Thank you.
Just one other area that is part of the recommendations that you have had a chance to look through is, firstly, the 2022 elections had a lot of election offenses, from candidates to supporters to even the teams that you organize and the civil society. The question is, can you inform the committee how much prosecution in terms of numbers has taken place in relation to the 2022 electoral offenses, whether it's election officials or those that you recognize that who had the arms, or leaders that you knew that sources of funding was coming from them to purchase those things? Or tell us, prosecution of the 2022 election offenses, where are we?
Thank you, sir. That's a very valid and very good question. I don't have those figures on hand, but I can take them on notice and provide a written response. It will take a little bit of time to separate out the specifics of those offences, but I'd be very interested to know them as well as not only charges but the success of the prosecutions. I think those are very valid questions.
It's also related to some of the recommendations that we strongly recommended as a committee, that we really need to change our laws to increase the penalties. Has your teams, are you initiating some of those legislative reforms that we really need to empower you as enforcers of the law? So that, for example, one thing that we were discussing, if there is a candidate that was seen to be the offender and initiating criminal activities, that person must be penalized for life. Should never stand again, whatever criminal offense. And we need to initiate those legislative processes. And the question is, there are laws that need to be changed to make us effective, whether it's a defense force or police or an electoral commissioner.
Thank you, sir. I agree that strong laws are essential. They need to be enacted and implemented and operationalised by the relevant agencies. I can advise the committee that the Police Act is currently subject to review to make sure that it is fit for purpose, so that any unprofessional conduct is dealt with severely. We expect the very best of our police officers. We need to make sure the law enables us to compel that positive conduct. I'm unable to comment on any legislative reform policies that may be underway by other agencies, but I can confirm the Police Act review is underway.
When will that be concluded?
It's my expectation that it will be concluded this year, sir.
Coming back to the questions that we asked the defense forces earlier, in terms of intelligence gathering and intelligence sharing, because that was one of the big weaknesses that we identified in the 2022 elections. And I note the response from the Chief of Defense that there's very little sharing going on at the moment. Would you be interested in a mechanism, a formal mechanism that creates opportunities for all of you as security apparatus to share intelligence on a regular basis? If one doesn't exist, or does one exist? Do you have a mechanism?
So, I think what you said is correct. We need to share more information. I think it's still in its infancy. I think it hasn't been brought to the CDF's attention as yet. But as for the police intelligence, we have started working with all the other intelligence, defense intelligence, NIO, all the other relevant intelligence agency to have that interaction between us, for the sharing of information.
Do you intend to formalize that mechanism? Because, again, I say this, a lot of the areas where we saw extreme violence, and, we recall the presentation, I recall the presentation from the former, sadly now deceased NIO chief at the time, who said that it was a failure of intelligence and intelligence sharing amongst the agencies. And that's one of our key recommendations here, is to formalize that, so that all of you are sharing information, so that you can better use that information. And we are now, 1.5 years out from the elections, and there's still no formalization of that. And that concerns us. And so, to my next question, how quickly can all of you mount up these joint sharing of information, or gathering and sharing? How quickly can you do so? And is it practical to do so? Or would you prefer to sort of operate in your own spaces? What's the general feeling, Commander?
Chair, as a committee, we worked well in the past. It just, I think, the two leaders talking to each other, and we bring that, because the police side, I know people that we
Is
work
that enough, just having casual conversations, or should there be more institutionalized mechanisms?
If I can recall, once working with the Navy intelligence, we work well with the police, whether it's at sea or on land.
Is that still happening now?
I believe it is the people that we work with the police as passed on to the next life. People change.
So it's not a formal mechanism, that's what you're saying?
I believe it was institutionalized between, we cannot share that classified information if it was not institutionalized between the two. We say, strategic information. But I believe, we have to revive that again. Not only with police, but other agencies. For defense, we have all our tentacles all the way down to the province.
Well, that's my question, essentially. Do you need some kind of intervention from us as a committee to, I guess, force the issue? Because based on our initial findings, that information that perhaps either one or one of the members of the intelligence community had or did not have, basically did not filter through to those who may have been able to action the information. And that is our concern. And you are just saying to me that something used to exist maybe 10, 15 years ago, and it doesn't exist now. Mr. Tasio, you want to add something?
Yes, I'm just trying to add on. We already have the JSTF in place. Maybe we could refine it more and utilize JSTF to share information with the PNGDF.
How often does the JSTF, I guess, formally meet, or does it have to formally meet? Give us a brief overview of how that works.
So JSTF only when we do have a major event, and it calls upon for JSTF to come together.
Only for major events?
Yes.
What about every other time? What happens then?
Oh, it can be used. It depends on the commissioner can follow.
Who activates it?
So the Joint Security Task Force is a ad hoc apparatus that is established on an as-needs basis. An event like a general election will have a Joint Security Task Force. When it stood up is a question of necessity. Unfortunately, it's not a statement anyone likes to hear, but funding does play a role as to the ability to stand up a JSTF. It is an effective apparatus when it stood up. It's not necessarily stood up just for a major event, a critical event. Anything that requires a multi-agency engagement traditionally would be established through a Joint Security Task Force. In my experience, it's very effective.
Okay, coming back to the funding thing, and I take your points, to the funding issue. Do you have any issues getting your funds from the government? Or from Treasury or whoever, all these?
In general, Riyadh, sir?
In general, you are?
No, my question is are you asking in general or specific to...
Okay, let's just say your operational funding, first of all, and then your PIP funding, Do they arrive on time?
We, if I take last year as an example, sir, warrants, by the end of the year, I'm advised a satisfactory amount of warrants. I believe all of our budgeted Special Police Assistance Program, for example, was received. Yes, delays in warranting is a challenge that affects us.
Warranting or cash?
Warranting, sir.
Okay.
It is a challenge. It causes delays and bottlenecks in operational planning and the operationalisation of intent.
Do you have any mechanisms for, or is it just, again, ad hoc, ringing up somebody in Treasury or somebody in Finance? How does that work?
Funding appropriations are scheduled, I believe, on a monthly basis, with arrangements for certain major operations to come through in a front-loading manner. That's what we would prefer to see. Whether that always occurs in a timely manner is a different question sometimes.
Asking the PNGDF for this year, they haven't received the PIP funding that they've asked for. All provinces have not received their, I guess, operational funds for this year. Has the police received its funding for this year?
There are police officers on the road and in the station, sir, and petrol in cars. Not saying we've received it all on time, but we've got funding this year thus far, yes.
So at least you're being prioritized.
Not saying that, sir. I'm saying
no, that's a good thing. I'm not saying that there's a negative
I'm
thing.
certainly saying that there is enough in the bucket to keep police officers on the road, cars running. Would we like to see more expedient release of funds? We would always prefer to see that. I don't think there would be any government agency in the world that wouldn't want to see it. But the timely release of funds is a challenge. It's an ongoing challenge.
So in terms of your preparations, RPNGC for 2027, you are satisfied with your election preparedness in terms of the actions you are taking and the assets that you might need?
We're on track, sir. We need to do more. We could always do more, and we do need to do more. Good groundwork has been laid. We need to increase the pace at which we're preparing. The long-term investments and procurement activity, vehicles, uniforms, accoutrements that police will use are underway. We need to speed them up, and now is the time where we are speeding up. We need to do more on that.
Thank you.
In preparation for the 2027 elections and the acknowledgement that if we don't address the security issues, 2027 will be worse than 2022. Have you had any one meeting between yourselves and the Electoral Commission with regards to planning for the 2027 elections?
No, sir, for defense.
Nothing?
Not as yet for us as well.
Well, that's frightening. Because you told us in the last interviews that if we don't plan well for securities, the 2027 election, which is not far away, will be worse than 2022. So, can you make an undertaking? We will help at our level, that all of us, this is a major event, as you said. 2027 is a major event, and at the backdrop of the terrible outcome of 2022 elections, well, every system must put the radar out now.
So, defense internally, we are preparing for 2027 and we are ready. It's always the request and we will always support. We are ready to support police, we are ready to support Electoral Commission.
So the constabulary looks forward to engaging with the Electoral Commission. I can appreciate there's a bit on their plate at the moment, but we concur this is a very significant event, and we look forward to engaging with them the earliest.
Well, one of the big issues is the already availability of illegal guns. And you just acknowledge that the strategies that you are deploying are not working very well. So you have to recommend to us what will make it to work. At least we guarantee that 2027 will be better than 2022. You need to tell us.
Chief, you may respond.
So, let committee know, let you know what we did in Hela. We took the soft approach, and I have every confidence Hela will come out of the turmoil. But Enga, we took a different approach. We took the harder approach. We forgot that we are dealing with our own people. It's a bit quiet now. That's what the defense is doing. In the presence of police, we are engaging with the community. We are engaging with the local leaders, engaging with the churches, foreign organizations like UNDP. They are on the ground, and that's the approach we've taken in Hela. And that weapon surrender was, I was there when they surrendered the weapon in 2022. It's making progress except Enga province. And Enga too is making progress, working with the people, working with the community leaders. Because when we leave, if the community leaders are not involved, the provincial leaders, we will leave a vacuum there. They must be involved and take control of the situation and of their province. I'm saying that in addressing law and order, plus also the gun issue. They must take ownership of it. We of defense, we are mindful of dealing and hurting our own people. We will always work at the back of police, supporting the police, but we are determined to see that gun, address that gun issue.
Just a follow-up to that one. At what point do you, I guess, admit that your current efforts are failing and other perhaps interventions would be necessary? Like, I appreciate that you've been working with the community, say since 2022. It's now 2025. And there's a way that you can measure your success in terms of how you are removing those guns from the communities. At what point between yourselves and the RPNGC, I guess our entire joint security apparatus, at what point do you say that, all right, all of these efforts are failing, we need another approach? When do you make that call? Or do you continue with these approaches hoping that there are positive outcomes? How do you measure your success?
Chair, when we went into the SOE, it was a guns and bullets against those offenders. And we continue to receive retaliation from the other side, from our own people. And we saw that after experiences in Bougainville, with guns and bullets, we were going nowhere. But it was talking through the leaders, the Melanesian way, we managed to address Bougainville. That's how we did in Hela. And I visited Hela twice. Hela is making progress. Now they're asking us to build roads. From the roads, we will see other things that we can bring into the province. The services that arm of government must reach the people. We must show concern.
If I may just butt in at this point. It sounds like a very ad hoc, fluid response, and there's no really hard and fast rule. Just listening to the responses here. But has there been any specific security, high intelligence training and responsive tactical response for the election purposes as a major event for 2027? It is the most important, if not one of the important, is the most important exercise any country is responsible for. So have we, I say this with great care, have the apparatuses or agencies responsible for security in the country taken any steps to either recommend, propose, or seek support from the government or bilaterals in bringing in promoting or engaging in high, risk curbing exercise or training, for that matter, if I may.
Thank you, sir. If I understand your question correctly, sir, is it that is there an upskilling
Yes.
Currently underway? Answer to your question is yes, sir. enabled by some recent legislative amendments, as well as significant investment in training, both with bilateral partners and security experts. The constabulary is currently, on Monday, commencing selection training for, I won't use the word elite, but certainly an upskilled intelligence collection analyst and tactical unit to deal with high-risk situations. At the same time, with our existing development partners, we are undertaking a significant upskilling in intelligence analysis, particularly with a view towards financial crimes, because we know that financial crimes have a nexus with offences that we see during the election period.
And does this have anything to do with this name that came into media sometime back of a Kumul 23?
It is the moniker that's been given to the unit, yes. It's a police tactical group that has a very clear remit, and it is to be a significantly upskilled police tactical group consistent with Australia-New Zealand counter-terrorism unit standards. It takes time to build these capabilities, but it is an investment that the constabulary is making.
It's an excellent investment. What numbers are we looking at in terms of personnel being upskilled?
There are numbers that I would be very happy to share with the committee if I could ask that it's not done in an open forum.
Thank you.
I can take those on notice and provide a written response.
The other question I had was, what are the numbers of the police force currently serving in the country?
Off the top of my head, sir, it's approximately 7,200, but I'll get the exact number from our manpower records for you.
You think there's room for improvement? And obviously there is great need for improvement
There
or
is.
beefing up numbers.
There is a significant need, sir.
Thank you. Now, what numbers in terms of your recruitment exercise are you welcoming into the force at this time or undergoing training?
Currently, infrastructure limitations cap a recruit course at 230 persons. By mid-year, we will have doubled that at the Bomana National Centre of Excellence to be able to train 460 or so at any one time. That means by the end of this year, sir, we'll be passing out close to 700 every 12 months.
Is there a likelihood of a second or third training facility being introduced in the country, apart from Bomana?
We are looking at decentralised training options. However, that comes with a significant cost impost, having to double up on training infrastructure as opposed to perhaps doubling up on accommodation at a single option, but we are looking at all options. Currently, the investment is in Bomana because that is where all of our enabling infrastructure is. As I said, so by mid-year, we should have doubled our accommodation for recruits to see a significant increase.
Chief Superintendent, there's been suggestions that an equivalent of the former, was it the the Australian agreement with Papua New Guinea being reintroduced? Is that anything that's on your cards at the moment in terms of an instant intervention?
I've never heard anything of that.
So there was in the last 10 years, or 20 years ago, there might have been. There was an agreement, a bilateral agreement between the security agreement between Australia and Papua New Guinea, specific to internal security. Does that refresh your memory?
The ECP, sir, yes. Sir,
Yes.
I'm familiar with the historical matter. I'm not familiar with any discussions currently on that topic.
Do you agree that that might be an intervention necessary for preparation for 2027 in the event that the support of the national government is going to be slow?
It's not a matter I would be able to touch upon, sir.
Can I also impose that maybe that's something you could take back to the superiors to explore?
I can take that on notice, sir, and raise it for the considerations. What I can say, sir, is assure the committee that the constabulary is focused on growing our reserves as well as, growing our regulars, as well as a significant investment in our reserves to ensure that we have men and women in uniform now and for the elections.
Thank you.
There's one other issue which the report highlighted, and that's the issue of collusion between political actors and police. Tell us how much information have you got and what actions will you be taking preparing for the election and the elections after?
Thank you, sir. That is an area of significant concern for the constabulary. whether it's occurring or whether it's just the appearance of it occurring, both are concerning. The current Police Act review underway is intended to strengthen the professional standards framework of the constabulary, to make very clear and impose strict penalties upon professional misconduct. The Commissioner has elevated the Internal Affairs Directorate. For many, many years it was just a directorate, to a division. It's headed by an Assistant Commissioner who reports directly to the Commissioner, to ensure that resources, manpower and the attention are given to issues of professional conduct, because it's a serious matter. The constabulary, is part of our planning for whether it's by-elections, LLG or general elections, looks at the placement of police personnel into areas to ensure that an environment is created where there is as small a risk as possible of any improper conduct. So whether that is sending personnel from one province to another to minimise that is something that we take into consideration for our planning, and it will be something that we consider for the general election, sir.
In terms of, once again, on the security aspects, what's your joint views on if we introduce biometric voting and its impacts on the security issues and the resources that are needed? So in terms of common role updating, in terms of what in your view, in terms of security, whether the government really should move ahead and bring resources in to address this issue of voting. If it's biometric, some of our views are that the security issues may be at a level that is easily manageable. What are your collective views, and therefore your positioning with the Electoral Commission and their efforts to bring in a manageable, affordable, sustainable voting system rather than the current one, whether it's photo ID or whether it's biometric or like what they're using in India, etc. So we need, in terms of the securities, I am of the opinion that the security issues could also be addressed if we enforce or move faster towards a different voting mechanism.
Sir, I think those are very valid and very strong observations. I would share your view, sir, that an examination of the options is warranted. Certainly anything which strengthens the integrity of the vote contributes to an improved security environment. Whether it's biometrics, whether it's photos, I'm certainly not an expert on electoral practices, but we would welcome a strengthening.
So,
Go ahead, Chief.
so I think that's a great idea. I had a look at the Ghana elections. I had a look at the recent US elections, use of technology. Speaking from the military point of view, information warfare, that's the only thing, the one thing that we have to control the input, where the data is inputted. Otherwise, with the modern technology, it can be also be manipulated. But where the data is inputted, that's where the stringent control has to be. But it will cut down, so it will cut down on, logistics.
I mean, this question is related to your abilities to prepare, to manage the data input flows, etc., etc. So your preparedness as institutions for security in the country through a new voting system, how would you align yourself or prepare yourselves for that?
So we have a directorate of information technology, and we are looking at cyber and all other things, keeping in pace with the world. So if it happens, I can say I think we are ready for it.
Just coming back to some of the issues around firearms, and sorry to bring you back there, but the one of our very specific recommendations is for the JSTF to be given the resources it needs to carry out some of the identification and profiling and all those sorts of work in terms of intelligence to isolate where these weapons are, and again with the ammunition and all of that. Have you received specific funding for this, and do you have a specific team dedicated to doing this work? I come to you, one.